My name is Carrie Nath. I had the honor, really, the honor tonight, first of all, of monitoring this panel, and then also of being able to work on this show in what we call an advocacy position or care position. So we talked about, because of the content of the show itself, and also in looking at the trajectory of theater and the way that we are beginning to welcome a wide swath of human variation, right, onto the stage. And how do we make spaces equitable in doing so? I think when we look at radical inclusivity or even the word accessibility, it gets thrown around a lot in a way that sometimes can lose its meaning. But I think in talking about equitable space, that's a place for us to start, maybe. So this, as you know the show, I mean, you all saw it, is centered around the lives of these two gentlemen and their relationship with their mothers and the way in which they dealt with their diagnoses of autism at a pretty young age. And though this panel is going to focus on later diagnosis and what that meant, so we've got some folks here that are going to share their story and their family members, and some of their family members as well. I think one of the most beautiful things about this play is it opens up multiple conversations about autism and about neurodivergence. And so in that spirit, we're going to start off this evening. If we wouldn't mind going to the panel first to introduce yourselves, and then I'd love to start with the folks who have maybe more recently received this diagnosis later in life and what that journey has been like for you. But starting first with introductions, if you wouldn't mind. To my right, if you don't mind, start first.
Julien Wulfgar.
Listen.
I'm Donovan Lane.
Amy Lane. Pegeen Reilly. Moira Mangiameli.
And can we thank our members of our panel for So if you would, whoever feels most comfortable, wouldn't mind starting and share your story first about what was your journey maybe in receiving diagnosis, and then what was that experience like for you once you were able to receive the diagnosis itself? Is there anyone who, Pegeen, do you want to start?
I have to thank Julien, actually, and I don't even know if Julien's aware of it. I was reading the question and it said, what led you to getting a diagnosis? I was in my late 50s when I got diagnosed, and it was pandemic, lots and lots of pain that we couldn't figure out what was going on, and Hannah Gadsby. I had time on my hands, and I was noticing and feeling kind of guilty because I was in bliss during the pandemic, because I didn't have to say no to people. I could say no if I didn't want to do something, but I didn't ever have to. And that got me interested, and I was having just really way over the top pain and sensory. And when I would try to describe it, a lot of what I said, I understand this now, I didn't understand at the time. A lot of what I said made sense to the doctors because it was my feet or my back or something. But then they'd ask me a question and I would be like, well, no, because I'm always up on my toes. Or, well, no, that's not how I do it. And that, I think, probably made it really hard to diagnose what was going on. And then I watched Hannah Gadsby's Nanette, and I'd always, I grew, we all knew I was weird, but we didn't know what was going on, right? There was, Pegeen's a hothouse flower, or, watch out, she just sort of falls into things. When I told Kerry about my diagnosis, she said, oh, that explains the dancing. Which, you have to be a good friend to know me well enough. And she's right, I love to dance, but I don't know where anybody else is on the dance floor. So someone has to herd me. And I watched Hannah Gadsby and I listened to her talk, and everybody was laughing at these things that she was describing. And I was like, well, that's what it's like to be in grade school. I mean, that's the way teachers talk to you. And that got me kind of exploring it, and I could not find anybody to do a diagnosis. Moira spoke to Julien's partner, Murphy, and he put me in touch with their doctor, and that kind of started all of it for me. It was a long process, but I'm glad I got it finally. It gives me the language to say things like, I have to stop now, right? Or I have to turn the camera off, or in a way that isn't in any way asking permission or apologizing. Just simply saying, this is what I need, and so I'm doing it now.
Thank you for sharing that. And I also just want to own, I think I've got the freedom to laugh just because we shared that lot together. But it is that sense of like we were talking earlier before the show, the light bulbs just start to go on, you know? Who might want to go next, or Julien would like to go, or Donovan?
Sure, for now. Yeah, so, you know, like you, I also felt weird, alien, disconnected a lot from people in my whole life. And like a lot of autistic people, I get hyper-focused, so I would spend a lot of time like trying to diagnose myself. I would get a lot of medical books and psychology books, and nothing really kind of fit. So again, during the pandemic, actually prior to the pandemic, I reconnected with my now husband, and we were communicating, and he would say, I don't know, do you mean it like this? Is this, you know, he would kind of question it, and I was offended, because that's the first reaction you have, because people are constantly questioning who you are and what you're saying and what you're doing. So I think you build up this defense mechanism. And I'm like, I don't know what you're talking about. He said, you know, he goes, I don't mean any offense, but maybe you're on the spectrum. You think that you might be on the spectrum. And of course, first thing, I was mad. I was like, what? Why would you even suggest that? Because, you know, most of us grew up with this idea of Rain Man. You know, I don't hit my head. I don't, you know, I'm functioning, as they say. You know, I don't, I have a job. I can support myself. You know, I have a master's degree. It didn't occur to me that that could have even been applied to me. So I went online, like always. I spent most of my life online. And I found a bunch of autism tests, and I started taking them, and my score was through the roof. And I was like, what? How is this possible? So I took another one, again, hyper-focused, take another one. It was always really high. And I thought, well, okay, I'm going to find somebody, but it's really hard as an adult to find an adult diagnosis. They're always diagnosing children. They love to focus on boys. They do not focus on girls. The research is not there on girls. It's getting better. Tony Atwood is somebody who has really championed females and adult diagnosis. He's Australian. I think he is Australian. So anyway, I contacted UNMC because they're supposed to be a specialist in autism. And they said, no, sorry, we only do children. I was like, what am I supposed to do? I want answers. I want to know what's going on. And somebody, someplace, because a dog with a bone, that's also an autism brain, I'm going to do it until I get it. And I found this woman in Lincoln. And because it was during the pandemic, I said, oh, good, I don't have to drive or hate to drive. I don't have to be in person. I hate being in person. She let me have my camera off. I don't like to have my face on the camera. And so she gave me the test, and she's like, yes, you are autistic. And I was like, wow, this is the best. And I was bawling. And Murphy, I asked him, I said, well, I don't really need this because I work. I know it's not going to give me any kind of disability or anything like that. And he said, you know, maybe it's good for your peace of mind, just to have that peace. And I said, okay. And then I was talking to him before I came here. We have 5 dogs, and some of them are really afraid of rain and thought they're so key on to stay home. But he said, you know, I wanted to encourage you to get the diagnosis, but I was afraid if you got the diagnosis and she didn't say you were autistic, but you had already made peace with the fact that you probably were, because I was self-diagnosed. He said, I didn't want you to be crestfallen. So I mentored anyway. It was all out of pocket. Insurance didn't cover it. It was over $1,000 to do the content. And I now feel, now I know. I have that answer. It felt really good for me to just know that. And unfortunately, self-diagnosis, most people do not accept that. They think you're full of BS. Oh, how could you possibly know that you're autistic? Hello, we know we're autistic, right? It's not a mystery. But now I can actually say, listen, I was diagnosed. I have this official diagnosis. And so, I don't know, for me, it really did create a sense of peace. It gave me the answers that I needed, that I've been searching for my whole life.
Thank you. No, thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
Donovan, do you mind if I add something really quickly before
Yeah,
we
go ahead.
hear your part of the story as well? Thank you, I appreciate that. Just Dave Oswaldson, playwright, felt strongly about this as well. Self-diagnosis. He said, the frustration that comes with that is that there is exorbitant cost. I mean, you say $1,000, sometimes it can be between $2,000 and $6,000. And that sometimes people self-diagnose because they can't get anybody to see them and to go through it. And to be able to have that peace of mind is so important. So he felt very strongly, and I appreciate your creating the avenue as well for that, to be able to share.
Well, and I did want to say one other thing. There was, before Elon Musk and destroyed Twitter, there used to be a beautiful online community of autistic people. I met tons of people who are autistic and a lot of adult diagnosed ADHD, and I did talk to these people, but he wrote, and a lot of people laugh because he's such a lunatic. So I lost that kind of online community.
Yeah. Donovan, would you provide sharing your story?
Yeah. So I guess, for a long time, I also kind of noticed, I'm kind of different from a lot of people. I kind of struggle, making friends at first. It gets easier once I get to know people, but just that initial contact is pretty hard for me. I also have hyper-focus issues, which leads me to be terrible at games like chess and Connect 4. Just because, when I'm playing, here's my strategy, this is what I'm going to do. The other people usually can pretty easily counter that. And I'm like, well, I guess I just lose then. And me and my mom recently were talking with my doctor, get the test, and it was only about a month and a half ago when I was officially diagnosed. So, and that initial reaction, that explains a lot about me.
Thank you. And that having that understanding and how important that is. So we've heard from our panelists who have, and it seems like even all three within the last 2 years, you'd say 2 or 3 years, this diagnosis has come in. So to add to that story, family members to share, what was that like for you, having known these family members all your life? And I know Murphy is not here, but too, and you've shared some of his work, so feel free to share more of that. But is there anybody that would like to go first? Family members.
I'll talk about Donovan. Donovan is 19 and is a sophomore in college. So this play especially was resonating with me. Donovan has always had low support needs. And so there were things that we noticed, but they weren't some of the more stereotypical, what you think about as autism. I think, Julie, you talked about Rain Man, and that is something that I think we had in our head. And Donovan was verbal, and he was social, and he was, right? So we never put it together. And it was really when he was transitioning into college that this really first started. My husband and I started thinking about, I think maybe there's more going on. High school and grade school is so regimented and so routine, and Donovan thrives on routine and this regimen. So it was when transitioning into college that we started talking about, I think that we should talk to his pediatrician about this. And one of the first things our pediatrician said when we first brought it up, I think maybe we should get him assessed, this is the perfect time to do it, because once he's out of the pediatrician's office, once he's really into adult world, it's impossible to try to get somebody to assess someone. And so it was right there. We were with children's physicians, and Dr. Burt was the first one. And know that we had tried to set up this over the summer, last August, but we couldn't get an appointment until January. And that was even like, poof. And then it was three separate appointments for assessment. So it was 3 separate appointments for assessment. And then when we got the diagnosis, everything made sense. It was like I met my son for the first time. And I think we sat down when we got the diagnosis, and it was the most that you had talked about, because I think for the first time I felt like I really saw him and understood him in a way I never had before. I'm getting emotional because there's a lot of mom guilt about it. I think about gosh, what a different parent I would have been if I had known this earlier. I don't know how you felt about it, but I thank God for the diagnosis. I do. I celebrate it because, again, I think I can just be a better mom to you now.
Amy, thank you for sharing that. And I know we've got Kleenex on the way. Because it is, rehearsal, you should have seen us in rehearsal for this play. I think we went through more Kleenex in this rehearsal process than we probably have. And it continues. I was involved heavily with the rehearsal process, but to come back tonight, and I've been away for a week, it feels like I've been away for a year, and to see the show again, and I'm in the back, and I'm like, and I know it's coming, right? But you also I see the actors, and I see them finding more moments, and how that relates to their own lives and their own personal stories and their own family stories.
I think, and it's a big learning curve. Again, this is all new for us. So I know, if I can speak for you for a minute, that was one of the first questions you asked Dr. Hayes, was just give me more information about what this is and what this means now. And so, it's a big learning curve, isn't it? Just readjusting. What does it mean? What does the spectrum mean? What does it mean, low support needs and high support needs? And what does this mean for how do we need to change to best support you? It's a big learning curve. My parents are here tonight too, because it's a big learning curve for everybody in the whole family, isn't it? That again, it's like meeting him for the first time in a really wonderful, awesome way.
Well, I think it's that thing too, when we talk about diagnosis, you can hurl into what's called the medical model, right? And there's this little thing between medical model and the social model within disability. And that I think, not to get too into the weeds, because you can go into, you can be here all night, ladies and gentlemen, so get a blanket and a pillow. Is that it's not about cure, it's about care. And I think that diagnosis can send us in the world of we have to cure. We're not here to cure autism. We're not here to cure anybody. It's about care, right? And what are the times you need the medical world, and what are the times you need society, and what are the times you need yourself and your family and all of the above. So, and I don't want to oversimplify, but I also don't want to take over the panel because I'm a talker. So I'm going to hand it off. I don't know, Julien or
I just real
Mo,
quickly want to talk about that care versus cure. That's really important to me. I walk around my gorgeous home and say, autism built this house. I'm very successful professionally, and I am successful professionally because I have a brain that, of course, I have weird pains, and I fall into walls, and I don't really like to travel, and there's all of that other kind of crap. But if you can tell me what you want to do, I can build you a path to get there. And I'm 59 years old, and I now understand that almost nobody else can. Had cure been the approach, as opposed to a family who just said, when I said elastic burns my arms, of course it doesn't burn my arms. Nobody in my family questioned. They were like, well, don't wear elastic. I grew up in an environment that said, figure out who the hell you are and be that person full time, full out. And I'm so grateful for that every day, like this one. But I think it's really important to embrace that. And that was hard for me to watch in the show tonight because I kept wanting to say, shut up and let him speak.
Yep.
Shut up. You know? So I think that's a really important.
And Dave specifically says in the opening of this play, I'm not trying to create the trope of the autism mom, but these are based off of experiences and conversations I've observed. And it's not coming from an evil place, but there's just so much we don't understand and know as society, and we're beginning to really open those doors, I think. So,
Sorry.
Moira, do you want to add, or Julien too? Either.
No, I mean, I think Pegeen said earlier, we're sisters, by the way.
Couldn't tell, could you?
And I think we grew up in a big family, 10 kids, and sort of very verbal, very confident, I think, group. Because we were raised to think we could be whatever we wanted to be, and anything we wanted to be was okay. But Pegeen was always. There's a lot of smart people in my family, but this one was like so far ahead. It was really annoying. I mean, it really was. Because, I always said I'm pretty smart, but she always got there way ahead of anybody else. And we used to, I remember one time, this was a long time ago, having a conversation with her and saying, it's like you got a file in your head, and somebody says something and it goes, oh, and says like the perfect exact thing. And I said, that just must be incredible. And I remember her saying at that time, and again, this was years ago, yeah, it's great, except it never stops. It's all the time. When I'm trying to sleep, all the time, the thoughts are always going. And it's funny now that I know about after the diagnosis and everything, I think, yeah, we all could have done a better job. We all could have done a better job instead of just thinking, there's always something with this one. She's the baby of 10 kids as if that wasn't bad enough, But I think the way that she has walked through this has been extraordinary. And, that she has found so many things about herself to celebrate. And I think she spent too many years thinking we're fucked up. Excuse my language. But, and yeah, I think now she knows that it really has, it's the fabric of what's made her be able to do the kind of things that she's able to do. So, yeah, yay for the diagnosis.
Julien, did you want to add anything before? I think, can I have a time check? You have horrible facting times. Good, like how much time do you have?
We could probably do the next
10? Okay, yeah, 10 to 15. But would you like to add anything more to what we've said before we open it up?
Sure. I just wanted to hang off a couple of things. So I think that's a fairly common thing. Autistic people, I think, tend to do okay in a regimented situation like you did in high school and school because you know exactly where you're going, what you're doing. And I had the exact same thing. As soon as I got into college, I had what I thought was a nervous breakdown, but it was, I don't know what it was. But I really did fall apart. I didn't know what I was doing, where I was going. So, I thought it was like a psychiatric episode, but, had I known, and this is the thing, I mean, I think now I could go back and tell myself, look, this is what your deal was. I don't know that I would have necessarily lived my life differently, but I think I would have been less doubting and less self-loathing, because I think you do develop a lot of self-loathing because you think, why is everybody else doing this and I'm not doing it? How come I can't understand this? Why do people? So I think I needed that when I was younger. And then off of the idea of business thoughts, that's very true. The anxiety, I think, sometimes goes with it a lot of the thinking and the hyper-focus and all of that is really challenging, I think. But again, with this whole idea of a cure, there's a guy I found who's in England. He's a very successful, I don't know, TV presenter, I guess. He does like a children's show about animals. And he did this really wonderful documentary about his autism diagnosis. He also was diagnosed very late in life. He did think he was autistic. And he has his own challenges. Like he said, if I had not been a hyper-focused person on animals, I would not be successful today. And he really hates the idea when somebody says, would you want to be cured? We do not want to be cured. We just need people to accept who we are and stop trying to force us into a neurotypical world where we don't really function well because we don't necessarily understand how that works. So I think there needs to be a lot more, not just acceptance, but just saying to people, look, okay, so we don't fit into this group and that's fine. But a lot of companies, which is why only like 22% of autistic people are gainfully employed, because so many companies say, teamwork, 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 be in a team, be friendly, I cannot. So I took a really long time to say, I need to do my own thing, and I love animals, and love dogs, and I started my own business, taking care of dogs, and I also teach. I mean, I had to kind of cobble together a living, but I can't make a living through education and taking care of animals. But, you know, that's the thing. Sometimes that's what you have to do, and we have to have, I think, also government support, where you can get insurance, where you're not being paid, you know, have to pay you the nose with insurance, health care access, you know, all these things should be basic rights for everybody, because not everybody can go into a company and work and get a pension and all this. But I did want to say one thing about Murphy. I'm very lucky because Murphy actually has ADHD and probably also is autistic. He actually, during ADHD, he did not remember he had ADHD. I don't know how you can't remember this. But I had talked to his mother when we first got together, and she was like, oh yeah, he was diagnosed from a doctor and he's on pills. And I was like, what? And so I talked to him, and he's like, oh yeah, I threw those pills away. I'm like, what is going on with you, buddy? So he totally understands me and totally accepts me. And we get along really well because I'm very organized. Well, I'm not very organized, but I pay everything on time, and I'm, you know, like this. And he's kind of like, well, you know, money doesn't matter. So we're a good compliment, and I feel like we can. In fact, we changed our last names to be our own family because neither of us really had much to do with our own families anymore because of all the trauma and shit we went through with our families. But we actually changed our names. We got married. We changed our last name so we would have a whole last name together. Sweet. Because we really do suit each other. So yeah, she's a good egg.
One of the best.
Yeah, he is.
There is a good eggs on this stage right now. I mean, if we could, and I'm about to open up for questions, but there's this word disclosure, right? And many of you may be familiar too, but there's a power in being able to disclose and say, I had this and I own it and it's a part of my life and this is a part of who I am, right? And a very big part of who I am. And then, some people can say it's safe to do that, but it's tricky, right? Because who's going to turn around and when is that going to be used against you? Insurance being a great example. And again, I won't go down the hiding hole. But so I just want to thank the courage it takes to get up and have this conversation. And I just want to give a round of applause again for our panelists for building and I want to thank you all because you're being here, I am going to make a grand assumption here, but I would like to think that you're here because you want to learn more, right? And because you also want to see and hear the validation that deserves to be happening in this room. So right now, I'm curious what questions you have. We've heard stories from family members. We've heard stories from the individuals diagnosed later in life, and we saw this play other aspects as well. What questions you might have, and just take a moment, think about that. And I'm going to look at my cheat sheet in case you don't have them.
I just make a comment. We have a daughter who's 63 years old, who is probably on the autism spectrum, but there was no spectrum when she was young. And it was like she was just this weird kid that babysitter said she sounded like the other kids, and she would sit as a Montessori and kind of be folded within herself. And she has never been diagnosed. And she probably would never think she is on the spectrum. But from the time she was 2 years old, she ran away from home. I'm not kidding. She ran down Geary Avenue in San Francisco when we were trying to move. She ran down a hill at a Renaissance festival and never came back. He had to chase it. Well, we didn't have to chase. We had to chase her. That was very, very unusual behavior. And she has gotten through life, sort of, and a train. Not ever passed the Cornell Law School. But she has kind of ditched us forever because we never did anything for her. And it's been very difficult. You know, and we've had to realize that she is just has a different wavelength. And it's probably the autism spectrum. And so I'm constantly trying to learn more about what was going on in her head, or, you know, it's been a hard thing.
Well, and it's one of those, and not to discredit Donovan being a male, or I, as far as I know, you identify as male, right, on the stage, is that also the diagnosis for women, as compared to the ratio to diagnosis for men. And I was refreshing myself on some of the information about that. I think, Pegeen, you've done a lot of research on that.
Ask any autistic person and then give yourself 5 hours of learning about autism. We live down rabbit holes.
But I mean, things like, like when you look up why are women not diagnosed as much as men, and literally one of the things was oftentimes they're told by doctors, it's just PMS.
Yeah.
It's
I was told by
PMS or it's
3 doctors
ADHD.
that I didn't seem autistic. And the third one, I finally said, I don't seem autistic to me either. Are you an expert in autism? And she said, no. And I said, I think I'd like to speak to one. And she said, fair enough. And, but yeah, they're just sure. My back wasn't hurting, my feet weren't hurting, because that wouldn't be happening.
Wait.
Yeah.
So there's something that men have more rights than women?
And you know what's weird about it is it has to do with healthcare.
What the heck?
I know, it's bizarre.
And suddenly the panel takes a turn. But interestingly also, one of them was that, no eye contact, and this is cultural training, right? That if a woman or a girl is refraining from eye contact, either she's just shy, whereas if a male is refraining from eye contact, that's a sign of weakness, right? And we know that's not true. But that's just a cultural, where girls are just more shy or trained to be more shy because they shouldn't be as forward as males, especially when they're younger. Yeah. Oh,
So I think girls are just told that you have to get along.
Yeah.
You have to blend in, you have to have friends. And we mask more.
Yeah.
Mimic more. I mean, I really was not like one of the, I was always kind of a loner kid. So I don't know, I guess I'm not really the average type person, but yeah, I think a lot of the girls, they absolutely mirror each other. They look at how other girls dress and how other girls do their hair, their makeup, and they start to do those things as well. If they become which is why I think a lot of girls then get diagnosed as having borderline personality. That's like the first thing they get, borderline personality. Depression is really common. Anybody who has an eating disorder, bulimia, anorexia tends to be autistic, and it tends to be girls. Because, you are told so much, you have to fit into a mold, you can't be yourself, you can't be, because, a guy is assertive and a girl is a bitch. A guy is this and a girl is this. So it's always this kind of negative thing. So a girl is always taught to be smaller, 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 and blend in, blend in. And that's why we go, I went 50 years or whatever without being diagnosed, because we just kind of learn how to navigate. That's how we're acculturated. And I think because boys don't do that, then they think, oh, you're a little bit weird. But with the girl, she's, like you said, she's shy, she's quiet. It's really a disservice, I think, to females in general. Aside female, we need to know this.
There was a question
Yeah,
here.
I was just going to ask the people that have the diagnosis, what is helpful? What are the words that are comforting from a parent or feel positive?
That's such a good question, and I'm struggling with it because I feel like I got so much of it. I can tell you, like every youngest child, what wasn't helpful. It wasn't helpful to hear, well, everybody does that. Well, everybody feels that sometimes. I mean, I was in my 50s before I actually knew that not everybody feels like they're getting bit all the time. And is trying to figure out if they have bugs on them. Not everybody feels like they have a match held to their skin. Not everybody can't sleep if they don't have tensile sheets. And what was meant was, you're not alone, right? That was the message, is you're not alone. You're loved, you're not alone, you're safe. I definitely understood that I was loved and safe, but they were lying when they said I wasn't alone. So that would have been helpful, I think. I'm a little torn because of like our generation. If my family had looked at my difference and said, we need to get you into a special school, I wouldn't have the life I have today. So I feel like I got this crazy magical balance of, there were padded guardrails around me. So I was allowed to kind of do this, but I wasn't gonna fall off the edge. I don't know that everybody can grow up a Reilly though, so I'm not sure that's a solution.
Yeah. And that's what I think has been helpful is, like, my mom and also a lot of the other adults in my life just have been accepting of who I am instead of trying to force me into being neurotypical. Like, I don't know how to think like that. Like, and I'm also not good at kind of like pretending to really be interested in things that I'm not. So it would have been really difficult to get me out of being who I am. So it's really good that a lot of the adults in my life have been letting me be who I am.
Yeah, don't force your kid. My parents dragged me to a bunch of stuff, and I was one of those kids who was like an adult as a child, and I just looked at the other kids and were like, you guys. I didn't enjoy being around them. I didn't enjoy playing with them, and I got teased, and I liked my childhood being alone. Because I like to watch movies and watch my cartoons and play with, bike riding and play with dogs. But when when you kind of try to force a kid to be something that they're not, I think it does create trauma. That was one thing I thought was really interesting when I got my diagnosis. The psychologist said, one thing that's a little bit different about you is you don't seem to have as much trauma as most autistic people. And I thought, what? That's a terrible thing, which I don't think is true. I think maybe I hide the trauma better than she do. But I mean, a lot of people who are autistic who grow up are traumatized. They're traumatized by life. Just constantly being bombarded with, why are you like this? Why can't you be different? Why can't you stop doing that? Why can't you go? Why can't you enjoy the party? Why can't, and it's really, really damaging. So don't do that to your kid. Let your kid be your kid.
One thing that I heard that really has helped me, I don't know if this is useful to you, but I heard a creator who said neurodivergent humans, particularly autistics, are running advanced software on legacy hardware. And anytime I find myself like I've pushed too hard and I'm shutting down, or something that I knew how to do I can't do right now, or I remind myself it's the legacy hardware. It's okay. What do you do with legacy hardware? Well, you reboot. So I sit down for a second in a quiet thing and I hit restart and I come back up and I can remember how to do the thing. But it explains so much. It explains all of the ways that I glitch. And why, when I am running at full speed, you can't stop me, you can't keep up, don't try. Both of those things are true. So maybe that's a question to ask yourself if you're trying to deal with somebody who's struggling.
Yeah, I think that's interesting. A lot of people do compare your brain to a computer. And I've always identified with robots, believe it or not.
Well, of course.
Like every time I watch sci-fi, I'm like, oh my God, that robot is me. Why is the robot me? Always the robot is me. Or the dog is me, or it's never the human. It's always a robot or an alien.
Humans are weird.
Humans are humans.
They don't make any sense. I don't get it.
In fact, Resident Alien, if you watch the first season of that show with Alan Tudyk, I laughed so hard. I don't like comedy very often, but we laughed so hard. I'm like, oh my God, that alien is autistic. He's so coded autistic. Alan Tudyk, he is coded on. I think he's probably autistic.
Hey, he's pretty cool.
This has been the best panel. And I know we could go, truthfully, like sleepover, right? But we are at time. And so I do want to just take a moment to really thank, a huge thank you to Blue Bar for opening up the space for this conversation to happen and for producing the show. I'm so grateful for the cast and the crew and the staff that keep the doors open here and make this place roll. And for you all for supporting, not just this play, but theater and to support opening our eyes and minds to the spectrum of autism and the spectrum of human life, right? And that's not to diminish either one of those by generalizing. So I want to be really clear about that. And I want to thank our panelists and family members and folks for sharing their story. It takes a lot of courage to do that. And it is the way that we learn and grow, because you can do all the data, and by all means do the research. I love myself some research, but personal narrative and getting people's stories, because no two stories are the same, right? And that's what allows us all to be the unique people that we are. And that's what makes the world the best place to be, right? So thank you all, and enjoy your night. And if you have more burning questions, feel free to reach out and send them in via email as well. So thank you all so much.